XYY syndrome is a genetic condition in which a male has an extra Y chromosome. Symptoms of usually few. They may include being taller than average, acne, and an increased risk of learning problems. The person is generally otherwise normal, including normal fertility. The condition is generally not inherited from a person's parents but rather occurs as a result of a random event during sperm cell development. Diagnosis is by a chromosomal analysis. There are 47 chromosomes, instead of the usual 46, giving a 47XYY karyotype. Treatment may include speech therapy or extra help with schoolwork. Outcomes are generally good. Prevention is not possible. The condition occurs in about 1 in 1,000 male births. Many people with the condition are unaware that they have it. The condition was first described in 1961. Signs and symptoms. Physical traits. People with the 47XYY karyotype have an increased growth velocity from early childhood, with an average final height approximately 7 cm, 3, above expected final height. In Edinburgh, Scotland, 847XYY boys born 1967-1972 and identified in a newborn screening program had an average height of 188.1 cm, 6 feet 2 inches. At age 18 their father's average height was 174.1 cm, 5'8" 1/2. Their mother's average height was 162.8 cm, 5 feet 4 inches. The increased gene dosage of 3X/Y chromosome pseudoautosomal region, PAR1, Shoke's genes has been postulated as a cause of the increased stature seen in all three sex chromosome trisomies, 47XXX, 47XXY, and 47XYY. Severe acne was noted in a very few early case reports, but dermatologists specializing in acne now doubt the existence of a relationship with 47XYY. Testosterone levels, prenatally, are normal in 47XYY males. Most 47XYY males have normal sexual development and have normal fertility. Behavior. In contrast to the other common sex chromosome aneuploidies 47XXX and 47XXY, Klinefelter syndrome, the average IQ scores of 47XYY boys identified by newborn screening programs were not reduced compared to the general population. In a summary of 6 prospective studies of 47XYY boys identified by newborn screening programs, 28 47XYY boys had an average 100.76 verbal IQ, 108.79 performance IQ, and 105.00 full-scale IQ. In a systematic review including 2 prospective studies of 47XYY boys identified by newborn screening programs and 1 retrospective study of 47XYY men identified by screening men over 184 cm, 6 feet half an inch, in height, 42 47XYY boys and men had an average 99.5 verbal IQ and 106.4 performance IQ. In prospective studies of 47XYY boys identified by newborn screening programs, the IQ scores of 47XYY boys were usually slightly lower than those of their siblings. In Edinburgh, 15 47XYY boys with siblings identified in a newborn screening program had an average 104.0 verbal IQ and 106.7 performance IQ, while their siblings had an average 112.9 verbal IQ and 114.6 performance IQ. Approximately half of 47XYY boys identified by newborn screening programs had learning difficulties, a higher proportion than found among siblings in above-average IQ control groups. In Edinburgh, 54% of 47XYY boys, 7 of 13, identified in a newborn screening program received remedial reading teaching compared to 18%, 4 of 22, in an above-average IQ control group of 46XY boys matched by their father's social class. In Boston, USA, 55% of 47 XYY boys, 6 of 11, identified in a newborn screening program had learning difficulties and received part-time resource room help compared to 11%, 1 of 9, in an above-average IQ control group of 46 XY boys with familial balanced autosomal chromosome translocations. Developmental delays and behavioral problems are also possible, but these characteristics vary widely among affected boys and men, are not unique to 47 XYY and are managed no differently from in 46 XY males. Aggression is not seen more frequently in 47 XYY males. Cause. Diagram showing XYY syndrome formation. MI and ME are the stages of meiosis, while the blue and pink circles are male and female cells respectively, and the blue and pink bars are Y and X chromosomes respectively. The purple cell has 2 Y chromosomes and 1 X chromosome due to fusing with a male cell with 2 Y chromosomes, which was due to division problems in Me of the male. 47 XYY is not inherited, but usually occurs as a random event during the formation of sperm cells. An incident in chromosome separation during anaphase 2, of meiosis II, called nondisjunction can result in sperm cells with an extra copy of the Y chromosome. If one of these atypical sperm cells contributes to the genetic makeup of a child, the child will have an extra Y chromosome in each of the body's cells. In some cases, the addition of an extra Y chromosome results from nondisjunction during cell division during a postzygotic mitosis in early embryonic development. This can produce 46XY/47 XYY mosaics. Diagnosis. 47 XYY syndrome is not usually diagnosed until learning issues are present. The syndrome is diagnosed in an increasing number of children prenatally by amniocentesis and chorionic villus sampling in order to obtain a chromosome karyotype, where the abnormality can be observed. It is estimated that only 15–20% of children with 47 XYY syndrome are diagnosed within their lifetime. Of these, approximately 30% are diagnosed prenatally. For the rest of those diagnosed after childbirth, around half are diagnosed during childhood or adolescence due to developmental delays or learning difficulties. The rest are diagnosed for a variety of reasons, including a small percentage due to fertility problems, 5%. Epidemiology. Around 1 in 1,000 boys are born with a 47 XYY karyotype. The incidence of 47 XYY is not known to be affected by the parents' ages. History. 1960s. In April 1956, Hereditas published the discovery by cytogeneticists Johan Tigeo and Albert Levan at Lund University in Sweden that the normal number of chromosomes in diploid human cells was 46, not 48 as had been believed for the preceding 30 years. In the wake of the establishment of the normal number of human chromosomes, 47 XYY was the last of the common sex chromosome aneuploidies to be discovered, 2 years after the discoveries of 47 XXY, 45X, and 47 XXX in 1959. Even the much less common 48 XXYY had been discovered in 1960, a year before 47 XYY. Screening for those X chromosome aneuploidies was possible by noting the presence or absence of female sex chromatin bodies, bar bodies, in the nuclei of interphase cells in buccal smears, a technique developed a decade before the first reported sex chromosome aneuploidy. An analogous technique to screen for Y chromosome aneuploidies by noting supernumerary male sex chromatin bodies was not developed until 1970, a decade after the first reported sex chromosome aneuploidy. The first published report of a man with a 47 XYY karyotype was by internist and cytogeneticist Avery Sandberg and colleagues at Roswell Park Memorial Institute in Buffalo, New York in 1961. It was an incidental finding in a normal 44-year-old, 6 feet tall man of average intelligence who was karyotyped because he had a daughter with Down syndrome. Only a dozen isolated 47 XYY cases were reported in the medical literature in the 4 years following the first report by Sandberg. Then, in December 1965 and March 1966, Nature and The Lancet published the first preliminary reports by British cytogeneticist Patricia Jacobs and colleagues at the MRC Human Genetics Unit at Western General Hospital in Edinburgh of a chromosome survey of 315 male patients at State Hospital in Carstairs, Lanarkshire, Scotland's only special security hospital for the developmentally disabled, that found 9 patients, ages 17 to 36, averaging almost 6 feet in height, had a 47 XYY karyotype, and mischaracterized them as aggressive and violent criminals. Over the next decade, almost all published XYY studies were on height-selected, institutionalized XYY males. In January 1968 and March 1968, The Lancet and Science published the first U.S. reports of tall, institutionalized XYY males by Mary Telfer, a biochemist, and colleagues at the Elwyn Institute. Telfer found 5 tall, developmentally disabled XYY boys and men in hospitals and penal institutions in Pennsylvania, and since 4 of the 5 had at least moderate facial acne, reached the erroneous conclusion that acne was a defining characteristic of XYY males. After learning that convicted mass murderer Richard Speck had been karyotyped, Telfer not only incorrectly assumed the acne-scarred Speck was XYY, but reached the false conclusion that Speck was the archetypical XYY male, or supermale as Telfer referred to XYY males outside of peer-reviewed scientific journals. In April 1968, The New York Times, using Telfer as a main source, introduced the XYY genetic condition to the general public in a 3-part series on consecutive days that began with a Sunday front-page story about the planned use of the condition as a mitigating factor in 2 murder trials in Paris and Melbourne, and falsely reported that Richard Speck was an XYY male and that the condition would be used in an appeal of his murder conviction. The series was echoed the following week by articles again using Telfer as a main source in Time and Newsweek, and 6 months later in the New York Times Magazine. In December 1968, the Journal of Medical Genetics published the first XYY review article by Michael Court Brown, director of the MRC Human Genetics Unit, which reported no overrepresentation of XYY males in nationwide chromosome surveys of prisons and hospitals for the developmentally disabled and mentally ill in Scotland, and concluded that studies confined to institutionalized XYY males may be guilty of selection bias, and that long-term longitudinal prospective studies of newborn XYY boys were needed. In May 1969, at the annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association, Telfer and her Elwyn Institute colleagues reported that case studies of the institutionalized XYY and XXY males they had found convinced them that XYY males had been falsely stigmatized and that their behavior may not be significantly different from chromosomally normal 46 XY males. In June 1969, the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, Center for Studies of Crime and Delinquency held a 2-day XYY conference in Chevy Chase, Maryland. In December 1969, with a grant from the NIMH Center for Studies of Crime and Delinquency, cytogeneticist Digamber Borgier-Onker at Johns Hopkins Hospital began a chromosome survey of predominantly African American boys ages 8 to 18 in all Maryland institutions for delinquent, neglected, or mentally ill juveniles, which was suspended from February-May 1970 due to an American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, lawsuit about the lack of informed consent. Concurrently, through 1974, psychologist John Money at Johns Hopkins Hospital experimented on 13 XYY boys and men, ages 15 to 37, in an unsuccessful attempt to treat their history of behavior problems by chemical castration using high-dose Depo-Provera with side effects of weight gain, average 26 pounds, and suicide. 1970s. In December 1969, Lorzek at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm first reported intense fluorescence of the at-rich distal half of the long arm of the Y chromosome in the nuclei of metaphase cells treated with quinacrine mustard. In April 1970, Peter Pearson and Martin Bobrow at the MRC Population Genetics Unit in Oxford and Canino Voza at the University of Oxford reported fluorescent male sex chromatin bodies in the nuclei of interphase cells in buccal smears treated with quinacrine dihydrochloride, which could be used to screen for Y chromosome aneuploidies like 47XYY. In June 1970, The XYY Man was published, the first of 7 Kenneth Royce spy novels whose fictional tall, intelligent, non-violent XYY hero was a reformed expert cat burglar recruited by British intelligence for dangerous assignments and later adapted into a 13-episode British summer television series broadcast in 1976 and 1977. In other fictional television works, a January 1971 episode by The Pricking of My Thumbs of the British science fiction TV series Doomwatch featured an XYY boy expelled from school because his genetic condition led him to be falsely accused of nearly blinding another boy. A November 1993 episode Born Bad of the American police procedural TV series Law and Order portrayed a 14-year-old XYY sociopathic murderer, and the May 2007 season finale episode Born to Kill of the American police procedural TV series CSI, Miami depicted a 34-year-old XYY serial killer. The false stereotype of XYY boys and men as violent criminals has also been used as a plot device in the horror films Il Gatto a Nuovo Code in February 1971, dubbed into English as The Cat O' Nine Tails in May 1971, and Alien 3 in May 1992. In December 1970, at the annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, its retiring president, geneticist H. Bentley Glass, cheered by the legalization of abortion in New York, envisioned a future where pregnant women would be required by the government to abort XYY sex deviants. Mischaracterization of the XYY genetic condition was quickly incorporated into high school biology textbooks and medical school psychiatry textbooks, where misinformation still persists decades later. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, screening of consecutive newborns for sex chromosome abnormalities was undertaken at 7 centers worldwide: in Denver, Jan 1964-1974, Edinburgh, APR 1967 June 1979, New Haven, Oct 1967 Sep 1968, Toronto, Oct 1967 Sep 1971, Aarhus, Oct 1969 Jan 1974, Oct 1980 Jan 1989, Winnipeg, Feb 1970 Sep 1973, and Boston, APR 1970 Nov 1974. The Boston study, led by Harvard Medical School child psychiatrist Stanley Walser at Children's Hospital, was unique among the 7 newborn screening studies in that it only screened newborn boys, non-private ward newborn boys at the Boston Hospital for Women, and was funded in part by grants from the NIMH Center for Studies of Crime and Delinquency. In 1973, child psychiatrist Herbert Schreier at Children's Hospital told Harvard Medical School microbiologist John Beckwith of Science for the People that he thought Walser's Boston XYY study was unethical. Science for the People investigated the study and filed a complaint with Harvard Medical School about the study in March 1974. In November 1974, Science for the People went public with their objections to the Boston XYY study in a press conference and a New Scientist article alleging inadequate informed consent, a lack of benefit, since no specific treatment was available, but substantial risk, by stigmatization with a false stereotype, to the subjects, and that the unblinded experimental design could not produce meaningful results regarding the subjects' behavior. In December 1974, the Harvard Standing Committee on Medical Research issued a report supporting the Boston XYY study, and in March 1975, the faculty voted 199-35 to allow continuation of the study. After April 1975, screening of newborns was discontinued. Changes to informed consent procedures and pressure from additional advocacy groups, including the Children's Defense Fund, having led to the discontinuation of the last active U.S. newborn screening programs for sex chromosome abnormalities in Boston and Denver. In August 1976, Science published a retrospective cohort study by educational testing service psychologist Herman Witkin and colleagues that screened the tallest 16% of men, over 184 centimeters, 6 feet 0 inches, in height, born in Copenhagen from 1944-1947 for XXY and XYY karyotypes, and found an increased rate of minor criminal convictions for property crimes among 16XXY and 12XYY men may be related to the lower intelligence of those with criminal convictions, but found no evidence that XXY or XYY men were inclined to be aggressive or violent. 1980s and later. The March of Dimes sponsored 5 international conferences in June 1974, November 1977, May 1981, June 1984, and June 1989, and published articles from the conferences in book form in 1979, 1982, 1986, and 1991 from 7 longitudinal prospective cohort studies on the development of over 300 children and young adults with sex chromosome abnormalities identified in the screening of almost 200,000 consecutive births in hospitals in Denver, Edinburgh, New Haven, Toronto, Aarhus, Winnipeg, and Boston from 1964 to 1975. These 7 studies, the only unbiased studies of unselected individuals with sex chromosome abnormalities, have replaced the older, biased studies of institutionalized individuals in understanding the development of individuals with sex chromosome abnormalities. In May 1997, Nature Genetics published the discovery by Ercole Rao and colleagues of the X/Y chromosome pseudoautosomal region, PAR1, Shoke's gene, haploinsufficiency of which leads to short stature in Turner syndrome, 45X. It was subsequently postulated that the increased gene dosage of 3 Shoke's genes leads to tall stature in the sex chromosome trisomies 47XXX, 47XXY, and 47XYY. In July 1999, Psychological Medicine published a case control study by Royal Edinburgh Hospital psychiatrist Michael Gotts and colleagues that found an increased rate of criminal convictions among 17 XYY men identified in the Edinburgh newborn screening study compared to an above-average IQ control group of 60 XY men, which multiple logistic regression analysis indicated was mediated mainly through lowered intelligence. In June 2002, the American Journal of Medical Genetics published results from a longitudinal prospective cohort Denver family development study led by pediatrician and geneticist Arthur Robinson, which found that in 14 prenatally diagnosed 47 XYY boys, from high socioeconomic status families, IQ scores available for 6 boys ranged from 100-147 with a mean of 120. For the 11 of 14 boys with siblings, in 9 instances their siblings were stronger academically, but in one case the subject was performing equal to, and in another case superior to, his siblings. Society and culture. Some medical geneticists question whether the term syndrome is appropriate for this condition because many people are normal.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.